I'm Tim Lambert. I'm from Biddeford, and I've been watching the Racino debates lately, and I've listened to everyone speak. I watched them talk on both sides of the issues, and I think everybody's talked a lot about the economic and environmental impacts that it'll have on the city. So I'll spare you my thoughts on that. Instead, I want to tell you what it was like to grow up at the Scarborough Downs with a stepfather who was addicted to gambling. Someone threw out a statistic the other night that said only 5 to 8% of the patrons will develop gambling addictions, and I think they said, well, we can take care of that. Well, you can't. And remember, that 5 to 8% of the patrons, and I don't even know what that 5 to 8% is. Is it 400 people? Is it 1,000 people? And how many people are we talking? But they have families, they have children, they have spouses that are also affected by their gambling addiction. One man who spoke Monday night told a heartwarming story about how he taught his daughter how to bet on horses and how she won $200 and used it to buy a new bike. Well, my parents tried to teach me how to gamble. They tried to teach me about quinellas and trifectas, but you know, at 6 years old, I just wasn't into it. So instead of reading the programs and learning about the horses, you know, it just bored me waiting all that time you spend between races, waiting for the next race to start. So I'd ask my parents if I could go play video games, and I'd try to get money out of them. And you know, if I was lucky, they'd give me 50 cents, and I could go play pinball. But you know, 50 cents doesn't last very long. And I'd try to find other things to do. They'd give me the car keys so I could go hang out in the car and listen to the music. Again, 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, still hanging out in the car. And I'd hang out at the bar. I know they had several bars at Scarborough Downs. I'd hang out, I'd sit there at the bars, and I'd eat cherries and lemons, and I'd talk to the bartender, and I was pretty young. And that was fun until the Scarborough police said, oh, you're too young to be sitting at the bar, so I'd have to go sit someplace else and hang out there. And then occasionally, you know, we'd get into fights with the other kids whose parents just kind of dumped them off and you know, were in the same situation that I was in. Sometimes if my parents did win some money, they'd give me more than 50 cents, and I'd be able to stretch those video games a little bit longer. Fortunately, I didn't have to spend every weekend of my childhood at the Downs. I remember one day when I was about 11 years old, my mother dropped me off at Funtown for the day by myself so that she could go to the racetrack. And Funtown's not a very fun place to go when you're by yourself, and that was a lousy day. All the memories I have of that day are bad memories. I lost my watch that day. I had like $3 to buy myself a hot dog, and even lost a hot dog when I jumped up to sit on the wall, and the hot dog fell on the ground. And, you know, so I mean, Funtown's a great place, but as long as you're there with people. I also used to get to spend every other weekend or so with my real father. He worked a lot, so unfortunately, you know, he was traveling a lot for business, but when I did get to spend time with them, we had a great time. And then at the end of the weekend, they'd have to bring me home to my mother's house, my mother and stepfather's house, and we'd come home to an empty house on a Sunday afternoon. There'd be nobody there to greet us, you know, so we'd just be there to fend for ourselves until they got back from the racetrack. So, as for the jobs the Downs provide, the Scarborough Downs provides, and the Biddeford Downs would provide, my mother, you know, she did get a job taking bets there. She figured, okay, I spend enough money here at Scarborough Downs, might as well get a job here. So she took bets there, and they fired her when she tried to take a vacation, or when she did take a vacation day. We took a trip to Niagara Falls. This was probably when I was about 12 years old, and she actually, you know, wanted to spend time with me. So she ended up getting fired by the Scarborough Downs so that she could do the right thing and spend a few days with me in Niagara Falls. She also used to have a good job working for the Department of Human Services. She worked there for many years. I think probably started working there in the early 80s or late 70s until 1987. She quit that job She wasn't fired. She wasn't laid off. She didn't have a better position someplace else. She had about $7,000 in a retirement account that she could only access if she quit her job. So she left the job to gain access to that money so that she could help my stepfather support his gambling habit. And in 1993, she filed for bankruptcy. So, it just wasn't the best financially. As I got older and I understood money, I tried to convince my stepfather to just skip a few weeks from going to the racetrack so that he could maybe buy me a bike. It wasn't going to happen. Week after week, he'd set aside a little bit of money from his paycheck just so he could buy a couple of cartons of cigarettes and gas if he had a car. He lost his license a lot, so a lot of times he never even had a car. But the rest of his money, whatever was left over from his paycheck after he bought his cigarettes, always went to the Scarborough Downs. The last time I remember going to the Scarborough Downs, actually I didn't go to the Scarborough Downs, I went to the Scarborough Police Department. It was when I was 17 years old and he'd been drinking. Scarborough Police Department arrested him in the parking lot before he was about to drive off from the Scarborough Downs after a night of gambling. So they called me up to come pick him up in jail. I don't know how many kids have to pick up their parents in jail, but he died about a year later, and no one in my family has ever had any reason to go back to the Scarborough Downs, which is good. I just assume be done with that place. So you're probably thinking, well, Tim, it didn't have any effect on you. You turned out to be a good kid. And yes, I've been told that I did turn out to be a good kid. But it certainly did have effect on me and my memories. And, maybe all that time I spent alone at the Downs, killing time or home taking care of myself, made me a little more independent than most kids. But I can think of a million things that I would have rather have done than hang out at the Scarborough Downs. With a complete lack of supervision, I could have easily gone the other way. I could have been hanging out on the streets, doing drugs. I did have another set of parents to look up to, so thank God for them. But I was fortunate that I had them, and I knew that I never wanted to be like my stepfather. I never wanted to be addicted to gambling or drinking or smoking or any of that. And I'm not, and I'm happy with that. But I feel bad for other kids like me, because they're still out there, and they're going to be out there. When we put places like the Scarborough Downs or the Biddeford Downs in an area, we're promoting gambling. And you might say, okay, so 5 to 8% of the population, so what? But remember, their kids have no control over that. When you're 8 years old, you do what your parents tell you to do. So that's why I'm going to vote no on the referendum.